Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another Casual Friday brought to you by the FTX app, the best mobile trading experience available on the market. Links available in the description below. I am in Austin, Texas for Consensus on the day of recording this. It is the 10th of June, and Don is not on holiday for once. Even he managed to get burnt out on it. So we've got a time zone recording for you, I suppose. As you can tell from the upper bracket, not too many news articles to go through. Been a bit flat and boring on that front. The market, however, has not been flat and boring. So we'll start with the important stuff, Don, is that Sam Trabucco liked your tweet about your back. So the tweet says, just had an X-ray and CT scan, which doesn't stand for crypto Twitter. Well, it does, just not in this context. To check out what's wrong with my back. Turns out it's just the biggest bruise ever from eating shit on a wave. Cute doctor also complimented my physique. Yeah, of course, right? You can't. the tweet is nothing without that additional information. Got to appreciate the little things during bear markets. So what kind of directional alpha can we derive from Trabucco liking your medical marvel tweet? What does it mean? Is it bullish?
If he has time to read this shit, he's not busy bidding, I guess. So I don't think it's bullish.
Yeah, it's like, why is he liking tweets during the breakdown? Come on, Sam. Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, but I'm glad that he's involved in my
glad he
in my
cares.
shit posting. Yeah.
Fair enough. Cool. On the market side of things, might as well get into it, right? Like higher time frame pictures just hasn't changed. I tweeted like a couple of weeks ago that I feel like I've been doing really well just via inactivity, and the market seemingly continues to reward that / agree. You all know the spiel if you follow us. The monthly time frame. It's the same old lowest close candle, 35.37. We had a monthly breakdown, and our argument consistently has been that when you get high time frame breakdowns, they're worth taking seriously on the bearish side because it's a sign of weakness. And then if you want to get involved on the long side, when you get a multi time frame range breakdown, whatever, it's, as we said, either on the failed breakdown of the range when it reclaims, that's good to go. That's kind of what happened at the range high. It's at much lower levels of support if the breakdown sticks and gives you value / cheaper entries. 14 to 20k is where that stuff starts to look tenable on higher time frames, or it's some interim solution where the market does go lower because the breakdown is shit, but then it forms some sort of range without reaching the levels you want it to reach. And then you end up getting long somewhere in that consolidation. But that takes months and weeks, right? You're basically asking for more higher time frame candles, and given we're dealing with monthly and weekly time frames, that's like a multi-month process at the very least. Where the market is right now, it just broke down and it hasn't reclaimed, so you can't take that long trade. It hasn't reached the previous cycle levels, so you can't take that long trade either. And not enough time has passed for that higher time frame reaccumulation or range between levels to form either. So none of those three rather reasonable buy the dip / long scenarios have materialized as far as the high time frame charts go. And anything else that we missed on that front?
No, that's perfectly accurate.
Yeah, and it's the weekly time frame thing as well. There's like the lowest close range, whatever, if you want to get earlier signals at 32 to 34k. We had 1 week where we literally wicked that level, closed green, and we're currently trading below previous week's low, and the market looks kind of droopy, to say the least. There was a bit more inflation data, and scrolling down to the S&P and the Nasdaq, they've basically full retraced the rallies they made off their lows, so not much else to write home about on that front. ETH USD, that's BTC USD, right? High time frame breakdown, it's still below support. If it reclaims something, at least on the weekly, we can have a conversation about a bounce, but there's no point having that conversation in the absence of that reclaim, right?
If you look at the Bitcoin weekly chart, right, I think it's like 9 red candles, and then you have 1 green candle, and this week has basically been flat in general. So if you just look at that from like not having any bias, not having anything of the sort, it's just clearly strong bearish trend into consolidation, which is usually a sign that you want to have trend continuation, right? This is like a bear flag in the making, which we all don't want to hear, but it's just, this is how the chart looks right now. So being too overzealous in buying this, especially like you said, given the monthly doesn't agree, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if you're going to be counter trading the breakdown of a high time frame monthly range, and you're using a lower time frame to do it, you better at least have good evidence on that lower time frame, right, to make the case for
Exactly.
a high time frame wick. And if you don't even have that, then yeah, it's not exactly comforting. As far as ETH USD goes, just eyeballing this, Bitcoin's down 3.7%, ETH is like 6.6. That beta is really picking up. But it's similar argument as we discussed, like the monthly time frame. Granted, the range isn't as clear, but if we just take the lowest close from June, previous summer's close, same thing. Monthly breakdown. The first real candle structure is around 1K with the 200-week moving average. That useful trend following proxy coming in at 1K as well. So that's kind of really the first area to maybe nibble at this thing as far as, hey, there's stuff here. And then the much deeper discounted levels are, they start at, in the hundreds, as in 600, 700, thereabouts. I've just kind of drawn the whole box from the April 2018 green candle, when the bear market really
Yeah.
kind of started. I mean, that seems to be like a reasonable area if things get really cheap, speed up, discount, whatever. But in terms of where the market is right now, it's the same story, right? High time frame breakdown hasn't reclaimed anything, hasn't formed a new range, and hasn't reached support either. So there's really not much to do. The other caveat is that, as we've discussed previously, this quintuple sextuple bottom at 1.7K is just generating weaker and weaker bounces. At the moment, we're trading below it. Maybe there's some sort of intra-week spring setup if this breakdown fails, right? Like I've got the daily time frame on, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line from the first wick that we made on the 12th of May, which has been that quadruple low type of level. Maybe intra week if we get a deep discount through that and then close above and spring and sellers puke at the low, you might get some intra week long trade to the upside as a move back within the range. But as far as higher time frame macro stuff goes, which is kind of the focus of this show, those quintuple bottoms don't make for compelling bottoms in general. Like at the very least, you want the market to poke and prod and see what's hanging out below those. If you get a spring from that, a bunch of forced selling that gets soaked up, awesome. It will be obvious, like on the weekly time frame if that's the case, and then we can have a discussion about closing through that. That February cluster we keep talking about.
Yeah.
The highest close there at 1.9K or thereabouts. I think that would be a very decent counter trend bounce setup, right? You have a quintuple bottom, the market pukes through it very aggressively, gets soaked up, and then closes above resistance, right? That's a very different chart, and we can have a conversation about 1 to 4 weeks of upside should that happen. But again, we're not going to waste too much time entertaining counterfactuals every single week, of which there is no evidence at the moment, right? It's one of those we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there, and we're not getting there for the time being. Any ETH commentary I've missed out on?
I mean, Eve is just trying to outdo Bitcoin on the red candle front. It's working on the 10th now, I think.
Yeah, it's mad.
And yeah, I totally agree. Like the momentum's still to the downside. Everything's just looking shitty. And just because something is down a lot doesn't mean it has to be a good buy.
Luna.
Yep, we've done that before. Obviously, Eve quality wise much better than Luna, but still, like for me,
Oh, it's the
like you
most
said,
bullish thing I've ever heard you say about ETH.
yeah, it's like a 1.9K kind of reclaim
Yes.
would be at least something where you can actually start thinking about. I think getting long this, or if we just completely nuke, I think buying supports makes a lot of sense as long as they're deep enough. I think like the 1K area is nice, and anything below there, like the 800 area, is also really nice. The thing that I want to say though, talking about ETH, is ETH BTC finally reached support, or is like very close to it. It's the 26th of March 2018 support, or like the 2nd of April, depending on what candle you look at, um, which is
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, yeah.
0.057. We're getting there again. Obviously, we've tested that level before, but I could see a range there, right? So if we lose that, it starts looking really ugly really fast, because then you have like a confirmed head and shoulders.
And it's a point 0.4 at the very least at that point, right?
Yeah,
0.04.
I think 0.04, just, I mean, the higher end of that, hopefully. But I mean,
Yes.
yeah, 0.045, 0.04, anything there. If we lose the support, I think makes sense. And that is like, you look at that and you're like, oh yeah, that's just 20%. So ETH would be, if that happened at current prices, right? ETH would be trading at like 1.2K ish, a little bit higher. But the thing is, if that happens, Bitcoin is probably going to trade like 10% or 20% lower as well. which adds up, right? And that
Yes.
already takes ETH towards like 1K, and that's how these big drops on altcoins tend to happen. Bitcoin drops, and then you have like a big relative drop against Bitcoin on the altcoin pairs. They drop more, and then you get complete and utter wipeouts. And that's honestly what I would like to see at this point. When you have like a 10 candle bleed down,
Just rip the band-aid off, yeah.
yeah, just kill it so we can buy it and then send it. That's kind of my preferred
That's pretty
way.
catchy. Kill it so we can buy it and send it. I like it. That's pretty good. You
Yeah.
should tweet that and see if Trabucco likes that one. That'll tell us something.
Yeah, I mean that would be good indication of where the market's gonna go. Um, One thing that I want to note in general though, like comparing crypto or comparing especially Bitcoin to the S&P today, I've actually seen like some strength because if you look at the S&P, that's completely nuked, right? Bitcoin is down like roughly the same amount, which I mean it should be done more technically speaking. So basically the S&P bounced a lot when it went up, and we were all complaining that Bitcoin got outperformed heavily. Now on this drop, that's basically been nullified again.
Yes.
Now it's basically the exact same thing. So it's kind of funny because the decorrelation thing just keeps on getting wrecked every single time, and it ends up being like perfect correlated every single time. Even if it like decorrelates for like a day, a week, or something, it just comes back. So
Yeah, I agree with that. It to me it has like, especially given the bounces have been basically at the same level for BTC USD as you mentioned, because it hasn't, and ETH as well, because they haven't enjoyed the upside. It's like they basically have been on survival mode, right?
yeah.
It's like like risk pumps, crypto doesn't, and it's stuck at the same level. And then risk dumps, crypto dumps as well, but it has to more or less get absorbed at the same level, right? And
Yes.
that just keeps screaming sort of 6K style stuff to me.
Hmm.
And you know, it's again, it's tempting if I guess if you're less experienced, or even there's some logical appeal to this. They're like, oh, this level is so strong, it keeps getting tested, we bounce from it every time. But like, even from a purely technical point of view, in general, if you're testing the same level over and over from the same direction, that's a sign of weakness. And you know, at a certain point, the participants buying those levels and getting weaker bounces every single time and less upside every single time, like at a certain point, they just won't rebuy that level, you know?
Yep.
And that's why those levels break. Now, look, if you get that at a high time frame level, like it breaks and then it reclaims and then it springs, if you notice that there are willing buyers below that level, willing to absorb, then that's a different signal, right? We can have that conversation when it happens. But a lot of the time, you know, even very basic heuristic, if the level's so good, why aren't we moving away from it, right? That's one way to look at it. Like you're saying, this is like a fantastic support. Well, where's the bounce? Why are we glued to it?
Yep.
So that's another way you could think about these magnets for price, if you will. You know, increasingly weak bounces, the P&L of those participants is getting lower. They've got less upside every single time. At the very least, the market likes to explore what happens below that line in the sand. Usually not the best omen. And I will say, you and I were chatting off air, off stream, whatever, before this. Like this S&P TA has been fucking amazing from a higher time frame market structure point of view, right?
Yep.
I think we had this consolidation as resistance, as kind of bearish retest area. I think in another stream I had like the lowest close of both of those underside candles or whatever, and it's just been textbook, right? Like very
Hmm.
textbook weekly market structure, downtrend type of thing. And now the one green candle, which gave us, oh my god, maybe the macro bottom. Well, not us, you know, we don't fall for that stuff.
No, we're too
But you know,
cool for that.
we're too cool for that shit. But there was some speculation that maybe this is the bottom because it's like an engulfing weekly candle after so many weeks of consecutive downside. Maybe at the very least there'd be a bit of momentum there. But you know that's basically been erased at the moment, and that doesn't look particularly compelling on the S&P weekly. Nasdaq's the same, was down 4% earlier, very much just erasing its gains from the little rally it enjoyed a couple of weeks ago. So you know it's the same old picture, right? It's like we're in the newsletter. Everything is below support. What do you want us to say? Like what do you want us to do? BTC below support, hasn't reclaimed the range low. ETH below support, hasn't reclaimed anything. S&P and Nasdaq rallied, but rallied into resistance. Now the rally's been wiped out. It's just like, what are we supposed to do in this point, right? I think the answer is wait. right? Wait for
Mm-hmm.
better signals or better prices, and I don't think the market is offering either at the moment. And that's it. It's a pretty simple requirement. We're not being like obtuse or vague or mysterious about what we want to see. It's like get above support or get cheap enough to be attractive. And maybe there's, like, as we mentioned, a third option, actually show some signs of absorption and for the trend to at least slow down. Like, we'll welcome any of that, but it's been a very one-sided game for the time being. And I'm looking at some altcoins right now, like the AVAX weekly,
Oh,
Solana. There's nothing here really.
it's utter. I mean, it's just completely wrecked, right? You just look at these coins, AVAX USD, Solana USD. That kind of stuff is proper 2018 bear market kind of stuff. And the thing is, it's down like AVAX, for example. AVAX USD is down 85%, right? Which is a shitload. It's down from 150 all the way to 22. The thing is, to go down 90 to 95, which the last bear market kind of did on almost all altcoins, this thing has to um, like basically cut itself into threes, and then like it's gonna
Fucking
be
hell.
at 7 at that point, right? That's like how low even the quality altcoins, for example ETH, went last bear market, right?
Hmm.
From the top all the way to the bottom, 95% down, which would kind of put AVAX, for example, at $7.
Sure.
And at that point, I mean, you're down 85%, and you have to go down another 70% to get to 7. So that's quite brutal, but that's just a game we play, I guess. And the only reason why you can have such massive gains in the altcoin land is because you have these massive drops as well. You just kind of like shed the valuations every single bear market, so you can begin anew and kind of send it again. And
Yes. That's why
I
people talk
mean,
about survival so much, right? Like,
yeah.
also, I've noticed one argument which I haven't found terribly compelling. I'd be interested to get your take. To me, it
Hmm.
feels a lot like cherry picking. And the argument goes like this: 20k BTC or whatever price level for ETH, usually when it coincides with previous cycles levels. The argument is essentially that BTC slash ETH won't go that low because previous bear markets have never retested previous cycles all time highs, right? Or arguments
Hmm.
to that extent. Now, the reason I don't find that compelling is because to me it feels cherry picking history. So, what I've got right now is BTC USD monthly, and I've just drawn the decline from 20k to 3k or whatever. And that was
Yeah.
like 83%, right? And that's kind of a standard number for market cycle corrections of like 80-ish% on the majors, ballpark, right? So
Yeah.
you could make the argument that it's never retested previous cycles highs, true, but then I could also pick very similar data and say the market hasn't bottomed cycle to cycle with at least 70 to 80% decline, right? And
Yeah.
even just 80% decline from 68k high takes us well into previous cycle levels.
Yeah, it's
And again,
14K.
it's not like yeah, exactly. So again, is that like a does that determine where the market's going to bottom? It's like absolutely not. But I feel like if you're going to make that argument based on previous cycles not reaching a certain point, and you're using just price history to make that case, you have to consider the point I've made as well, that if you're going to pick those percentages, you have to almost overlay them to current circumstances, and it's at least a wash, right? Like it's at least
Yes.
the argument is at best a wash because I can take like an equally valid point about percentage declines. And while you're saying it hasn't retested previous cycles in the past, well, my argument would be that previous corrections applied to this would take us there. And I think
Yeah.
both of those arguments are kind of shitty. But if you're going to employ shitty arguments, you might as well use them consistently, right?
Yeah. They cancel each other
They
out,
cancel each
basically.
other out. They're so bad that they cancel each other out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
when
cope,
you
I think,
it is cope, and the thing is, if you're arguing, yeah, you can't have this decline because it would take us below like the cycle, the last cycle. The thing is, right? We've never had this weak of a cycle before. If we're
Yes,
really in a
correct.
bear market, I mean, prices went up from 150, $160 all the way to 20K last bull market, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now we went from like 3K to 60K, which is insane, right? But it's nowhere close to what we've done in the past. And then you can also make the argument this is the weakest bull market that we've had so far, and that just shows weakness, right? I think all of these arguments are shit. I
Yes.
don't believe in any of them. You just look at the price. If you like, we cannot go below 20K because that's the cycle, the last cycle as high. I think that's cope. If you think we have to go to like 14K for this to bottom because we went down 80% last cycle, I think that's cope. The market is completely different, right? The macro situation is completely different. Everything is different. So what you have to do instead of just kind of chasing the fractals, and I mean the fractals are nice, right? But they're just one piece of the puzzle, if even that, right? They're
Yeah.
basically just they confirm your bias. But if you see price action that disagrees with what you think, right? For example, if you see absorption at 20K, maybe there's actually something to it, right? Maybe 20K is going to hold. Or if we lose 20K, the market isn't going to be over just because, oh shit, it's done
Yes.
something that
Yes.
it's never done before. Because like this entire argument, Bitcoin has never done this, so it won't.
That's
It's
so
such a
bad.
stupid argument to make because we know in crypto that like everything that just like hasn't happened before is going to happen at some point, right? Shit
Yes.
is going to blow up. It's crypto. It's the reason why we love the market so much, because of all the volatility and all the kind of stupid shit that happens all the time. So I
I
wouldn't
agree.
discount anything. I think it's just pure
It's
cope.
not a good way of thinking about the market, right? I think as
Yes.
far as fractals go, if you want to take a charitable view, I like to think of them as a kind of risk management reminder, if that makes sense. So you
Hmm.
don't use them to deduce what's going to happen to the market. You keep them in the back of your mind to bear in mind what might happen so that you don't blow up if it does happen. I think that's
Oh,
probably one of the more useful ways to think about fractals because, like, if you
mhm.
marry them and think they're deterministic, I think that's dumb. But if you keep them in the back of your mind, like this is possible, and if it happens, I want to be in a position where I don't blow up. That's probably one of the more useful ways to think about them. You know.
Very well put, actually. I like it a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a tweet there somewhere, but I hope Trabucco likes it. The second point I'll make is, yeah, as you mentioned, anyone who at any point in the cycle has thought about floor price, adamantium support, never below X again, never below Y, it can't do A because B, all of those arguments are just completely horseshit, and crypto literally exists to break that model of thinking, especially as a very speculative cycle to cycle market. It's just like no one who thinks in those black and white terms has done well. And it's just not terribly constructive. I don't think it's like a useful framework to have. It's like anything can happen. The price is the price, you know. So adjust accordingly is what I'll say there. Um, Anything to add on, I guess, technicals slash market stuff in general? It's the same old stuff, right? Breakdown, stuff below support. No compelling evidence of absorption at the moment. It could change, like on the weekly time frame, if stuff gets reclaimed or soaked up. But for now, it's like levels broke, markets below levels. What do you want us to say? You know.
Yeah.
Thing is,
I
like,
mean,
can you imagine if it were like an uptrend, right? Like how easy these analyses would be. We'd just say, oh look, there's a breakout. Breakout's good. Price is above resistance. That's good. See you later. You know. But because it's bear market and people are losing money, it has to come with yes. But if it reclaims, it'll be really positive. Like if someone was saying that in a like bull market, you'd probably laugh at them, right? You'd think they're idiots because you would always say, yeah, everything looks good, but guys, if it falls back below resistance, we're really fucked. It's like, yeah, but why are you saying that? It's not below resistance. Chill out. Like the trend is clear, you know. So
yep.
entertaining counterfactuals only becomes like intellectually credible when the trend is down and where the reversal will make you feel better. Like no one in the bull market keeps talking about, but if we go back below resistance, it's all over. That's not the whole point. Like the entire focus is that the market's above resistance and what that means. Whereas when it's the market's below support, you don't really talk about that kind of bit. You just focus on the potential reclaim scenario, even if it's like 9 weeks of not happening. There's like a little psychological bias, I think, creeping in there in many cases.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, just looking at the S&P, it just doesn't really make much sense to be too active. That kind of price action, I don't think lends itself well to being traded. It very much, and I said this last show as well, with like these clean retests, it very much reminds me of the 2018 Bitcoin bear market. That started out basically just very, very nice and orderly. When like it walked down, found resistance where it should have found
Mm-hmm.
resistance, then found support at a support that hasn't been tested, bounced from that support, found resistance again where it should. And like you just look at this chart and it's actually very, very technical, which is kind of hilarious because it's, I mean, this is basically the world economy. It obviously isn't like it's the American one, but it's like we're all kind of correlated to this
Yeah, it's a
shit.
risk proxy, like the most important risk proxy we have, or one of them
Yeah.
anyway.
And
And we
it's
could start
funny.
laughing about like bonds in 10 years and stuff, but don't have to. It's pretty
Yeah.
self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, so it's like it's trading like a shitcoin, which which I don't think is a good sign, right? You
Yeah,
don't
I know.
want that, but yeah,
I
we'll
remember
have to
Kobe
deal with it.
tweeting about this closer to the highs, and it was a very good observation. When Facebook dropped, like the traditional market's volatility really started to go insane with these household names dropping 20, 30%, almost out of nowhere, it felt like. And he was just like, I'm not sure this is a good sign for the market health in general, and
Yeah,
it obviously wasn't. And in general, yeah, I agree. When this kind of stuff um, trades like a clear technical downtrend, it's not great. I also just remember from us talking about when the Luna stuff was happening, about if there's a chance that you introduce systemic risk into the system, like in crypto, it's gonna play out. It's gonna happen
oh,
one form
good
or another.
times. Yeah,
Now, obviously, I don't think it's fair to say we predicted, quote unquote, the unwinding at the speed or the magnitude that it happened, but it just goes to say that if you were to tell anyone a week before the Luna blow up that two top 10 market cap coins are basically going to disappear and nuke the market with them, people would fucking laugh at you, right? But that's exactly what happened. And on that front, on that note, we can get into our first little quick news article, which is that the SEC court win over Terraform and Do Kwon opens door for UST investigation, class actions, etc. So clearly established jurisdiction here. They lost their appeal against the SEC, meaning the firm is obligated to respond to the SEC's subpoenas. The decision is an important step in establishing the jurisdiction of US regulators and courts over the firm, especially as reports emerge that the SEC is investigating the collapse of stablecoin Terra USD. I mean, like, people wanted regulation, right? Like, the bullish
hmm
case for regulation is essentially that it allows for regulatory clarity, and regulatory clarity allows large pool of institutional capital to come and buy stuff, right? That's kind of the back of the napkin argument for regulatory clarity. It's not this, like
nope.
not like this, as the saying goes, right? This is one of the kind of, I guess, worst case scenarios where it's a super public project. It affected a ton of people. It's very high profile. It affected savers. Um, if you like bet on Luna and you lost money, that's like fine, right? Like you might not feel good about it, but you're speculating on the future value of like a volatile cryptocurrency or whatever, and that comes with market cycles and risks and whatever, just normal crypto caveats, right? But as we've discussed, the issue with the UST angle, it was, first of all, play dollar games, win dollar prizes, and there are no good dollar prizes when it comes to that type of stuff. And
Yeah.
also, it kind of targeted savers, or at most appealed to savers, if you want to be generous, because the whole idea was, oh well, crypto, traditional markets suck, inflation is high, crypto is going down slash is very volatile. Here's a safe haven to move into stablecoins, which is supposed to be a risk off type of move, and you can also earn yield on them. So you have a ton of people who are actually just very smart and, you know, in terms of market timing and conservative with their crypto allocation, who thought they were not exposed to underlying volatility or didn't have any, crypto delta, if you will, and then they just got fucking obliterated. So this is how we get our regulation, I suppose, and it's not under a good light. This sucks. One final thing I'll note is that the regulatory arm generally works pretty slowly. So you might look at the past 2-3 months and say, well, look, there's technically no new massive stablecoin regulation or clampdown in the space. So maybe it's not as bad as we think. My concern would be that this shit moves slowly. So it could still come back and screw us for months and years to come. It just kind of takes a while. Although on this occasion, it might be a bit quicker given how the magnitude and publicity of the thing itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's a disgrace, really, what happened there. And the problem is, like you said, a lot of savers got hit, and a lot of very very prominent people in the crypto space actually promoted Luna. Um, which is obviously a really, really bad look, right? So I don't think there's any excuses to make. And the fact that we have Luna 2.0 is an
Oh,
even
mate.
worse look. That is just like, that just goes to show like how fucked up this all is. And I don't think that's necessarily gonna help the image of crypto whatsoever. Um, it makes a lot of sense, I think, for people. Like when I see people hate crypto, I kind of understand where they're coming from.
So
Not gonna
easy to do,
lie.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, and this is why like the bad criticism that we get from the media, oftentimes, I'm just like, dude, like it's just, you could pick a million things. Like why do you pick like something so stupid? But yeah, it's like in this case, it's very, very warranted, right? And people are going to criticize crypto, and for good reason. And I don't think we've seen the end of it. I don't think this is like an easy thing to kind of get past. We're probably gonna have to kind of eat shit for a while on the regulatory front. I'd be very surprised if the crypto industry could lobby itself basically out of this
You
one.
know, it's too big. It's too much.
Yeah.
Um, Play dollar games, win dollar prizes. Next one. On the news front, Yuga Labs wants ApeCoin on its own blockchain. ApeCoin owners think otherwise. So Yuga Labs proposed moving ApeCoin to its own blockchain, and the DAO voted that it wants it to stay on Ethereum. Man, to me, this is just stupid. And it's not even to do with what I think Ape performance would be like on ETH versus another blockchain. I think there's a much easier argument to make based on the overarching history that Yuga Labs made ape owners unbelievably rich, like unbelievably rich, and they did so unilaterally with no DAO, no voting, nothing from the ape holders themselves, essentially, right? They had an ape, they held it, and they just kept getting airdropped windfalls of money. If they didn't give away their seed phrase, had to put that in there, that they wouldn't have otherwise received at any point, right? And it ended up being like an amazing market hedge in general because everything was getting obliterated. And, you know, apes are whatever down in USD, sure, but like in general, especially if you take like the Genesis trade, which is that you just like minted a bored ape and you've done nothing since then. Yuga Labs should have posters on them in your living room and stuff, right? Because the amount of value they've brought to you while you've essentially done nothing, like as long as you didn't give away your seed phrase, you've done super fucking well. And so to me, this is like, and I saw Moon Overlord makes this argument a lot, and I completely agree with him. It's this hubris now where people think they've done well because they're like good investors or maybe they understand NFTs or whatever else. And now they're directly disagreeing with the entity that put them where they are in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And in their minds, they're like super qualified or even overqualified and can make all these decisions. Whereas my view is that you are very fortunate to have been handheld by Yuga Labs to get to where you are by virtue of being an ape holder or whatever. And you should kind of just let them keep doing it. Like it's almost like one of those if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. They've printed you a shit ton of money. You've had to do nothing for it. They probably know what's going on. You know, they've survived. They're resilient and kind of the flag bearer in the space. Unless there's really good evidence to the contrary, like mismanagement or like consistent flops or whatever else, man, you should kind of let them do their thing, and it'll probably be much better than you voting on it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, if you have like, you cannot argue that they've basically just made the playbook for how to do like successful NFTs.
Yes.
They just kind of like nailed everything, and I mean, I definitely didn't agree with every choice that they've made, but it's been clearly correct what they've done, right? So like, I wouldn't think that I can make better choices than they can. So I'm surprised like the the bear, the ape holders think they can, but I guess I mean, if maybe it makes you into a genius investor if you buy an ape for like an ETH or two or three, and then hold it to 100 and get like another 50 ETH airdropped.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't know because I didn't do it. So, I mean,
Yeah, we're clearly salty and we don't know anything about NFTs. Not entirely inaccurate. Thankfully, I mean, look, it says at the end of the article that while the DAO may be able to influence Yuga Labs' decision-making process, it isn't able to force its hand. I would be very surprised if Yuga just like overruled it. They're probably going to follow reluctantly this community consultation. I just think if I were an ape holder, I would just simply assess how well I've done via the unilateral decision making of Yuga Labs and let them give them at least that much before thinking that I know better. But maybe
yeah,
that's just some classic European humility coming from us. And on the NFT front, OpenSea pledges to take action on scams and intellectual property infringement. Good, I guess. Again, it's a bit of a slow news week, but it's very, very, very easy to criticize NFTs, like especially being outside of crypto or being maybe even a digital artist who's not crypto native or crypto adjacent or whatever. Not only just the low effort rug pulls that we've had in the space with brainless celebrity endorsement, like it's just been a complete cash machine for scammers. But as far as getting rid of some of the lower hanging fruit in terms of what makes NFTs so easily hateable. Definitely, there have been many cases of NFT artists. Well, no, not NFT artists. NFT proprietors stealing artists' work, NFTing it, and then just basically making money off other people's art. Surely that's got to be one of the easy things, not easy things to get rid of, but like one of the things to target to give the space credibility and onboard more artists and make people hate NFTs less. And it's very easy to hate NFTs. So this kind of stuff, cleaning up the space, some self-policing from the biggest marketplace is probably a good thing.
Hmm. I mean, there's always an argument to be made about decentralization, all that kind of stuff, but I largely agree. I mean, the NFT space doesn't really follow the ethos of crypto in general, which is interesting because, I mean, at the end of the day, if it doesn't, like, what is it? Is it legitimately just like a JPEG? Who knows? But I like the NFT space is just like very much centralized, and I mean, why not at that point? Just do whatever you think is best, copyright wise. I mean, makes sense. It kind of sucks when art gets stolen and sold. So that has like a few unique problems that it has to solve, that market. Yeah, I think it makes sense.
One thing that comes to mind, if we take a step back over the last, I don't know, 2 years, it's become so much easier to scam in crypto. I don't know if you ever thought about this from like a zoomed out perspective. Like with AMMs, for example, right?
Hmm.
Like back in the day, and decentralized exchanges in general, like back in the day, if you wanted to essentially rug pull, scam, or do it that way, um, you still needed to get listed on like a centralized exchange, right? And that would either be expensive or involved bribes or going through some sort of compliance process with different levels of rigidity. You'd probably need some sort of market making agreement for your token on that exchange. Maybe some sort of credible, like in the ICO era, white paper or premise for it to get listed in the first place. Have some sort of community, like all do all that type of stuff. Whereas now with Dexes and AMMs, like literally anyone can launch a token. The barriers to entry have been completely torn down, and that's why we see, and with stuff like Binance Smart Chain, whatever else, like the amount of avenues you have to just spin something up from nothing with minimal effort and without any of the costs that previously existed before you could kind of launch your own token. That's made it so easy for these like clone, celebrity, scam, rug pull garbage. It went from a decent barrier to access, or at least some effort where you need to like calculate the economic cost of setting up the infrastructure, if you will, to basically zero at this point,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same with NFTs as well. You can pretty much go to, as the joke goes, you pretty much go to Fiverr, and I'm sure there are tons of very cheap NFT farms at this point, effectively, which specialize in shitting out some 10k ugly something. It probably costs very little to do that now, and you can put yourself in a position where in the past, again, you'd need all those market making agreements and a token and exchange agreements, whatever else. Now with NFTs, AMMs, DEXs, etc., it's so easy to spin up a scam, and we've really seen seen people take advantage of that over the last couple of years. So I guess with this decentralization comes, as you'd expect, you tear down the barrier to entry. Man, some really shitty actors and projects fill that space. Do you agree with that? Just like that shift in market structure over the last couple of years, it just feels so easy now to make something out of nothing, or I guess make nothing out of nothing, as it
Mhm.
normally ends up being.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, we've seen all these celeb people like Logan Paul and whatever come into the space, start scams, allegedly run away
In Minecraft. Yeah.
with the money. And it's like and they do it over and over again, right? So it's like it's not like they just do it once. Allegedly, like I said, allegedly they've been doing it a couple of times,
Yes.
and I do agree on that front. It's it's funny because I would say that most of the stuff that is traded now, at least on the centralized exchanges, is actually much better than the stuff that was traded back in the day.
Yes.
But there's so much more garbage because it's just so easy. So there's like two sides to it. And 2018, every project I looked at was a scam, even like the more famous ones, right? I mean, you just looked, and I mean, I'm not saying it's a scam necessarily, but you looked at IOTA, it didn't really work. You looked at XRP, I mean, arguable what they stand for, right? And those are like the big projects from 2018. And nowadays you have like a little bit more sophistication, I would say. I mean, DeFi still went down 90%, but at least they do something, right? In comparison to like a lot of other coins or projects that just don't. Um, so yeah, there's we've kind of developed quite a bit in those few years, but the scams have not let up. I've always been of the belief that at some point we're gonna get rid of the scams and it's gonna get better. Um, the market has proven otherwise. It's just like the longer this goes on, the bigger the scams get, the bigger the Ponzi's get, and the more of them we have. It's just and that's dangerous. I think going back to like the regulatory landscape, if you imagine if we have another cycle and then we get another Luna,
Oh,
and then you add a zero to the blow up,
yes.
that's gonna be quite wild, right? So when I read these headlines of the EU or whatever or Canada or a bunch of countries trying to regulate crypto, I mean, there's a reason for it, right? It's we don't like it obviously because it's our market, and I mean we can spot the scams from a mile away.
Yes.
But there's obviously like the more kind of mainstream it gets, the more risk there is to completely obliterate people. And I think Luna actually did a really good job of obliterating like random people,
Hmm.
not necessarily native to the crypto space. And like I said, just imagine the same thing happening when Bitcoin's trading at 500K. Uh, it'd be fucking mad, right? So um, yeah, that's something that I see on Twitter all the time, like people complaining about this and that country trying to like regulate, and then we have stuff like Luna happen. And it's like either we self-regulate and don't let this shit happen,
Which we
right?
failed at, right? Colossally.
Horribly, horribly,
I think
because
irreparably. I'm almost comfortable using that term, you
yeah,
know?
because the thing is, right, there were quite a few people actually speaking out about all of this shit. Um, I mean, even I, and I'm really not a smart person in that regard, said
True.
like, thank you. But even I said like, if there's systemic risk, it's gonna get tested. It's very obvious that this shit doesn't go like well for in the long run, right? And so I could see it. A bunch of people, Eric Wall, and amongst a lot of other people, actually spoke out about Luna and got absolutely shit on, right?
Yes.
So like the self-policing actually went the other way around. We self-policed, but we self-policed the people
Yeah, the
that
critics.
actually tried to speak out.
My
Yeah.
favorite example, my favorite anecdote about that is that I agree, like Eric Wall and Nick Carter and Freddie Reynolds, etc., were expressing very well grounded skepticism. First of all, it still doesn't stand up in the social media engagement driven age to Do Kwon's ego at the time, and also the amount of sandbagging and obsessive behavior done by the lunatics, who
Hmm.
presumably A, felt a sense of loyalty to Do Kwon because he made them rich, and B, just kind of defending their own bags, right? That's never going to be a fair fight. But my favorite example of this, like we're talking about like people on Twitter and independent thinkers and analysts posting tweets, like fair enough, if you wanted to steel man the counter argument, you could just say it's a visibility thing, and like how loud is their voice. But that argument flies out the window when you have to realize that Sam Bankman Fried, one of the most public people we have in the crypto space, went on Odd Lots, one of the most prominent traditional markets podcasts, and they asked him about algo stables and Luna. And I think, I forget his exact wording, but I think he said, "We all know how this ends."
Yeah, he did.
We all know how
Which
this ends. So this is, again, probably one of the smartest minds in crypto on the mainstream platform, saying very decisively, unambiguously, what's going to happen and how many changes took place after that. Fucking zero, right? Which also
yeah.
ended up being the price of this stuff after the blow up.
Oof.
So, like, yeah, I think self-policing, we failed. If anything, if I wanted to be optimistic, maybe you and I could point to trends where self-policing is getting better, but we can't. It's getting worse, in my opinion. Like,
Yes.
people just fucking thrown in the towel at this point. So, if we fumble the bag ourselves, the self police, we then can't act surprised or disappointed after normies get wrecked and someone else comes to do the job which we've failed to do and are getting worse at doing. Um,
Yep.
we could end on a slightly more positive note. I'm at Consensus, and I'm like obsessed with crypto slash Twitter. Like it's our life, right? Whether we like to admit it or not, it's been like full time for 5 years, staying abreast of most things in the space.
Yeah.
I show up to this conference and I'm just kind of walking around a bit, and I see a bunch of names, T-shirts, tokens, whatever. I don't recognize any of it. Like to me, it's like a parallel universe. It's like someone sent me to like a some sort of real estate conference, you know. And I see names, I can read the words, but they don't mean anything to me, and I don't recognize them. I don't have like a mental map for them. I can't place them. It's all just completely new. And the conversations themselves, people still talking about like DAO tools and different shit like that. So I was not hoping, but there was a part of me which thought that maybe I'll end up at like a bear market conference where a lot of the normie noob stuff has been washed out, and the higher conviction, more serious builders with larger ideas are left and a bit more experience, and it's that type of vibe. But at least from my cursory overview so far, it definitely doesn't seem that way. It's still very much like, you know, fresh, green behind the ears cycle nonsense floating around, most of whom, presumably, if history is any guide, won't be there for the next consensus, you know? And that's not a threat, I just mean they'll leave.
So you said you're gonna end on a high note, and then you say the most bearish words I've ever heard.
I mean, the food's cool. The food's nice here in Austin. That's a positive. And I will tell you an actual positive thing. This job can get pretty fucking lonely,
Hmm.
especially given it's full time and it's fully remote. Like if you're doing the independent trader analyst type of stuff, it can really catch up to you. There's no like workplace culture or like work drinks with friends and or any of that type of stuff. It doesn't really exist for many of us. So it does really feel good to be able to catch up and talk to and spend time with people whom you've spent dozens and hundreds of hours talking to online, to just be able to sit down and have a chat and have a drink and a conversation. The payoff is definitely there. And any minor disagreements you think you might have with people or you're not sure about them, on average, you'll get along just fine. And it's like an internet thing, which makes you think that you're like polar opposites. So I've very much been enjoying meeting my friends. My digital friends from the metaverse to the meetverse has been a rewarding experience. If you're in, you know, if this sounds a bit like you in terms of your circumstances and I guess how your social life is, or how there's no social element to your work life, if you can get out to one or two of these every now and then, I've only had positive things to say. There you go.
Yeah,
I tried to claw it back. I'm looking at
yeah.
the 4 hour chart, Don. Like, what am I supposed to say? You know, it's just
Yeah, thanks for the invite, by the way.
very, very welcome. As you know, you can't travel without me expressly telling you that you're allowed to travel. So
Yeah.
you should submit your application earlier next time.
Oof.
The Cred Visa Center will process it expeditiously.
No, every single time I say I show up somewhere, you suddenly disappear. It's how
Just sick for two
it's how
weeks.
it goes. Maybe in 5 years or so.
Maybe in 5 years. Any final bits and pieces? I think we've been fairly comprehensive as far as technical stuff goes. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
more or less as straightforward as ever. If we get a puke this week and that puke ends up in some sort of weekly or at least daily reclaim, I mean, we'll have time to cover that on like weekly open newsletter, etc. But for the time being, very much the same story of at least the higher timeframes that we care about being below support, and we want that to change before stuff gets
Yes.
interesting.
Hmm.
And it would be an insult to your intelligence to just keep trying to squeeze water from a rock or coming up with a million counterfactuals. Again, basic mental test for it. If the market were bullish, you wouldn't spend all your time saying, yes, but if it's below resistance, A, B, C, D, E, F, G would happen, right? You just kind of say, well, it's above resistance, that's good. Well, we're below support, that's not good. Um, Give us some other candlesticks to change our view.
Yep.
Cool. Anything fun going on your end apart from Trabucco following your physical health very closely? That must feel good.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. No, I mean I'm just still training, and I mean especially now that I know that I'm not injured in any way, I can like go hard again. So training, trying to like get in shape, get in form for my triathlon, however you pronounce it.
Triathlon,
In
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. In September probably, which I'm gonna fail horribly at, but yeah, we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. It's fun. Like the running and the cycling part is fun, going well. The swimming part, I mean, swimming 2 kilometers,
Ugh.
it's not really my kind of forte, but is what it is. I still have a
I
couple
mean,
of
you've got
months.
recent experience being underwater, so I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I have good experience being underwater over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's the one thing we managed to learn decently well.
Yeah, but the problem is when you're swimming, you shouldn't be necessarily under the water. That's diving, right? So
Details.
yeah, details matter.
I mean, you're good against the current, even though there's no current in the pool. Listen, the analogy
Oh,
is completely breaking down at this point.
yeah,
Like
it's
the
getting worse
market.
and
No,
worse.
that's cool. The only other fun thing is Ledger is, I think he's going to try to do like a flipping burgers with Ledger event in Austin.
Hmm.
Like go to like some, rent out basically like a restaurant or a barbecue place, and the whole flipping burgers meme, that might be fun. I'll try to get down there if that's the case. But yeah, conference stuff, America stuff for me. I'm really enjoying the ice cream aisle being 10 times the size of the fruit and vegetable aisle in these supermarkets. That's how you build a world superpower.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cultural divergence, I guess, from what I'm used to. But yeah, all in all, thank you for hanging out with us on this Friday. We're almost at 40k subs. I would appreciate if you like the video and leave a comment, maybe a smiley face or a sad face. Any type of face will do. Um, get us to 40k subs, like, subscribe. All the YouTube stuff is very much appreciated. Lots of content coming your way next week, as always. I've got Monday markets, Tuesday newsletter, Wednesday Don Baird Harding, and then Friday probably more of this because we can't get podcast guests nowadays. I'm probably going to go fight Avi Feldman IRL once this call is over because he's at consensus and he ignored our previous invite, and no one lives to tell the tale of not showing
No.
up to technical roundup. I've got some I've got some debts to collect on and some enforcement action to take care of. That's all from us. Thank you again to the FTX app for supporting us. Best mobile trading app experience on the market, especially given it has a hide portfolio button. If we get another streak of weeklies, that's probably going to be the most used feature out of any crypto app ever. So go check them out, support them because they support us. Thank you for watching. Take care. Don, thank you. And everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Bye bye.